Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of DIB Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Nelson Mills, CEO and co-founder at Vatn Systems. Nelson, thanks for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here and talking with you.
Yeah, well, it's exciting. The obviously, relationship goes a little bit back, but it's been super fun journey watching you. But before we get into actually Vatn, tell me about your background. I think it's pretty cool. Share it with the listeners, and then we'll move on. So, how'd you get to where you're at right now? What's the journey and the origin story of Vatn?
My story actually was building a career in academia. I was doing a PhD in political science, international relations, and I just realized that I really didn't want to be an academic. I wanted to get my hands on more of the world. So I ended up moving out to Utah and building a software company as part of a subsidiary for a communications firm, building a digital training platform. And that was fun. Learned a ton. Gained some big customers and got to launch a platform and work with engineers. But ultimately, I wanted to get back to my maritime roots because I had this fun childhood where I grew up homeschooled on a sailboat with my brother and my parents. And I wanted to work with the water again. So ended up connecting with a startup in Seattle called Pure Watercraft. Was working as a project manager there, building electric boats, took a couple models from idea to prototype. And they went on to raise 170 million and had a fun experience there. But I decided to come back to the East Coast, continued working in maritime technology until you know what? I'm going to go get my MBA, maybe think through some ideas, business ideas. Ended up getting sucked into venture capital, though. Worked for Global Founders Capital, Lux Capital during my business school experience, and then working for a firm called Link Ventures afterward. And I was finally like, you know what? I really need to start a company. And so started digging in, met the team at Decisive Point, and they're like, hey, take a look at the underwater space. There's a lot of opportunities here in the defense area. I started digging in, pulled my brother and another friend of ours, Jeff, into the conversation, and then pulled in, or Decisive Point connected us with a guy, Dan Hendricks, who was a special forces officer of the maritime dive team, and then was working in defense tech PE for a while. And we started, talking to customers, ideating, figured out hey, there's a real opportunity to build attritable underwater vehicles at scale at a fraction of the price of existing options, and decided to launch the company in April of 2023. And then since the last 2 years, it's been a wild ride. We've stayed very, very focused. We picked a initial product and developed it rapidly, started demonstrating it in military exercises, and then started selling it to U.S. government customers just this past December. So went from just an idea basically to vehicles in the hands of customers in about 17, 18 months. So been super proud of that, and then the kind of team built to accomplish that. And then since then, just recently announced a new product and continuing this wild ride at that. And
yeah, wow, so cool. First of all, homeschooled on a ship. That had to be pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it was. It was really fun. Yeah, my parents loved to sail, and they chose that life, and it was a great way to grow up. They were also entrepreneurs. They had a restaurant, and they had some real estate businesses. So they were able to manage that into just summers. They basically ran their restaurant in the summer in a very touristy summer kind of destination. Closed it in the winter, and we'd go sailing. So they just stayed up for that. And then we went all throughout the Caribbean. It was a good time.
Name your coolest memory.
Oh man, hard to pick. I remember in particular, we bought this boat. I was probably in the second grade, and the boat was a disaster, right? I think my parents bought it for 10 grand, but it was a 45-foot boat, so it should cost a lot more. And it was leaky, it didn't have refrigeration. We're sailing into Bermuda after a very rough day trip from Rhode Island to Bermuda. And the transmission line goes out, right? So it was impossible to shift. So my dad takes me down into the engine room, sticks a screwdriver in the transmission. It's like, when I tell you to go forward, go this direction, then reverse, go this direction with the screwdriver. And I was 8 or something. And yeah, that was always a fun memory. It was it's hands on, right? Right from day one.
Yes, no better way to learn. That's hilarious. So how did, we'll get into, more specifically Vatn, but you did some time, in the investment space. How did that, prove valuable in starting Vatn? What did you learn from that? What were some big key takeaways?
Yeah, I think it was super helpful. Not that every founder needs to spend time as an investor, but I think it does give you a lot of perspective on what investors look for, on how to structure deals, what to potentially avoid, and then it gives you a huge network of investors, right? Like a lot of the our initial pre-seed investors were people I knew, I had known for a while and had grown relationships with. I think that really helped. And then that network continues to be useful as we raise further rounds of funding, right? That being said, there's not necessarily like outside of financing, there's not necessarily like a ton of skills that transfer over. I think it was really my 6-7 years operating at early stage startups that gave me the skills to build this company. That being said, I did learn a lot from cold outreach on LinkedIn to source companies. That transfers surprisingly well to recruiting people initially for the team, right? So the main investor skill of the VC is cold outreach. It's a good skill for anything. So
Yeah, it is, and it's the worst one.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
That's painful.
It is.
Hey, I got something. Do you want to come work for me? You want to buy something?
Yeah, exactly.
So
sales, everything's flawless.
So brutal. So then you said you got with the Decisive Points, and 2 years ago, help me remember, but I don't think the defense tech hardware investment space was super excited about putting money into that, because the long run, had it already shifted then, or was that still?
I think it was like the beginnings of it, right? It was before Replicated was announced and stuff like that. So we were like, a few months maybe before it really kicked off. I mean, obviously there have been some trailblazers years before, like Palantir and Anduril, but I think it was really like a year or two after the Ukraine conflict that people really started, the whole sentiment around defense started shifting. And we've seen that from our pre-seed, where people were like, hey, we can't invest in anything that has potential to be kinetic, to like that shifting pretty radically, right? You're like, it's people dip their toes and then like, oh, we're going to do software around defense, or we're going to do things that aren't kinetic but help soldiers or help the U.S. military. And then it's shifting more and more like, yeah, we're comfortable with investing in actual parts of the kill chain, like entire stacks of that.
Yeah, and Decisive Point's a pretty cool company. I mean, investment company. It seems like they're very defense focused. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about them and how they helped you as you began.
Yeah, no, Decisive Point's amazing. They're both a venture fund. And also, they help companies access the defense market, right? Like write SIBRs, write other kinds of proposals, connect, basically an outsourced BD unit, business development unit for defense and government relations. They also run a ton of accelerators for NSYNC and I think a couple others. So they were an amazing early stage partner, introduced us to customers, helped us think through strategy, around government acquisitions, take a look, look through contracts, look through proposals. So yeah, they were awesome, great partner. They continue to be a great partner. Tommy Hendricks from there is still on our board, and we talk, maybe not quite daily, but close to.
Yeah, that's very good. Super helpful to have. Yeah, it's hard, starting these companies. There's so much to think about, and having someone that's in there and grinding.
For sure, yeah, we were blessed to definitely. Yeah, we're blessed to have like a bunch of like really really good investors on our cap table who have been helpful across the board. Yeah, so everything. Center Street Partners, who I've known for years. Blue Collective, I've also known for years. To our more recent investors like SAIC, Lockheed, RTX, and Keytel, and probably leaving some folks out, but not intentionally. Like we were really blessed with an awesome cap table, and I think for folks that are thinking about raising, it's so important to find those right partners who are actually going to do what they say, right? Whether it's connecting with customers or just being there, like answering your call, being like a sounding board of, hey, I'm thinking about this decision or that decision. What's your take? What do you think?
So, the Vatn, you want to get back in. So what problem, what pain point or opportunity did you see with, underwater, technology?
Yeah. So there are a couple issues we saw. One is that existing options were really expensive. You're talking $500,000 plus for small UUVs and millions for anything medium or large size. And then, it basically takes a small team of highly trained professionals to operate and deploy them, right? Just one vehicle. And so we saw an opportunity to build vehicles that are significantly lower cost, and vehicles that are significantly easier to use and really make them true force multipliers. So instead of a small team deploy one vehicle, let's have one person or a small team deploy tens and hundreds of vehicles, right? And be able to mission plan rapidly complex missions that way with minimal training, right? So you don't have to be, a Vatn expert in order to operate our vehicles, right? You can take a course and it can be your part-time job and you can come back to it and remember how to do it. No problem, right? So that's, I think, really where we shine is not just the cost of the system, but the user experience of the system, right? And that, I think, is that sort of intangible, right? That has made like Apple so successful. It's not necessarily that the phones are better, but they built an ecosystem and a user experience that is amazing. And see, it sounds kind of weird when you're like, oh, this is, you're talking defense. It's not a consumer product, but I think user experience is extremely important, right? It has to be easy to use. It has to be easy to train on. It has to be not frustrating, right? It has to be intuitive. And I think a lot of defense companies and sometimes B2B companies forget the importance of that.
Yeah, I think legacy, right? I mean, it's part of part of what they were selling then was the logistics and training tail to that. Well, we got to create our own training plan. So adaptability,
there's no incentive to make it easy to use, right?
Right.
You're going to make hundreds of millions just training them.
Yeah, no,
fair point.
That's awesome. And then was it hard to get the customer to see the value prop, or was it as soon as you kind of started talking about it, they're like, oh yeah, let's roll?
Yeah, I think in general, the value prop tends to be pretty obvious to customers, right? We see for people that are in the know and understand the problems, they immediately understand the benefit Vatn brings and our vehicles bring. And once they get their hands on it, then that only improves, right? If someone's not maybe super familiar with the problem set and they're coming in, sometimes it can take a little longer, but in general, we'll go brief members of Congress and they get it instantly, right? For the most part. And you see the same thing with the operators, right? If you have any experience with the existing stack of UAVs, you're like, oh my God, this is a game changer.
Yeah. What does your name stand for? I'm sure there's a meaning behind it.
Vatn means water in Old Norse. So we kind of an Old Norse thing. It was like, there's a lot of people doing Greek, and my brother and I have some Swedish heritage. So why don't we we'll go with Old Norse. So Vatn means water, and then Skelmir is like a mythical, like rogue kind of devil figure and trickster in Norse mythology. Okay,
very cool. So you guys are doing, I'd say visionary autonomy for unmanned systems, underwater unmanned. Talk to me about, are you more of a hardware? Are you more of a software company? And then, what are the key enabling technologies and what sets you apart?
Yeah, I mean, I think any robotics company in this day and age needs to be as much a hardware company as a software company, or vice versa, right? Like you can't just be one or the other, and I think build an enduring competitive advantage, right? If you don't own your full stack of key technology, then I think that's a problem, right? Like we have patents that are software algorithms, and we have patents pending that are hardware, right? And I think you need to own both. I think in general, though, where you will see the most challenge, and it varies a little bit upon certain robots, right? But in general, like I think the most challenging part tends to be software, autonomy, navigation, right? And so that's where the majority of our engineering team lives and spends their time. That being said, there are certainly challenges in the hardware space too of what we build. Mainly around like making it manufacturable, reducing costs, but also getting it to go really fast. That goes that has hardware challenges, also has controls challenges. So yeah, anyway, my philosophy is we're building a truly like integrated, vertically stacked product system. And that is ultimately what lets us reduce our costs. Ultimately is why we perform a lot better per dollar of vehicle cost. And it also gives us an enduring technical advantage, right? That's going to be harder for someone, a new entrant, to pick apart.
Yeah. So talk to me about tell me, you started with an early product. What was that product? What was the use case you were using it for specifically? Or, and how does it work moving forward? Like what did that look like?
Yeah. So our first product is the Skelmir S6. So it's a 6-inch diameter vehicle that's configurable to different lengths, anywhere from, I think, 4.5 feet to 9 feet, right? Depending on what you're doing for payload, how much weight you want to carry. And in terms of payload and use case, right, it's really adaptable. So from day one, we're like, how do we make this manufacturable, and how do we fulfill a good amount of SKUs while still making it very manufacturable? And so modularity is a core part of that, right? Where we have a core module with all the electronics, but then we can add on extended batteries. We can add on different powertrains. So you want to go fast, or you want to go slow and long range, we can adapt to that, right? And then you can add a variety of payloads and do all this with 0 tools and in seconds. In terms of payloads and use cases, it really depends on the customer. We see everything from delivery of electronic warfare payloads. So it could act as a decoy. It could appear to be a submarine. It could appear to be something on the surface. And we've done some of this in exercises. It could deliver GPS jamming effects. It could deliver RF jamming effects or other jamming. It could also, jam acoustic signals or sonar underwater. And we have other customers that are interested in kinetic effects, right? Where this is basically going to be a torpedo, and other customers who want sensor payloads, right? We have like an in-house sonar payload that can be used for a variety of things, finding objects, doing surveys or maps and bathymetry. And then that is one that also has a lot of commercial use cases, right? We're starting to see commercial applications in cable monitoring or cable installations, offshore wind, offshore oil, gas, things like that.
Yeah, so much capability there. What still kind of in the hardware, but obviously if you've got, are you looking at, I've talked to other folks, your friend Paul, with Havoc AI and some other folks, right? It seems similar. Is that the same kind? Lots of them, you're able to stick them out in the ocean for days, months, you're managing hundreds, like where are you seeing the customer drive you to, as well as, deploying capability?
Yeah. I mean, the appeal of the price point and the vehicles like this are massive, right? Being able to deploy massive. And it's great if you can build a ton, right? That is a challenge, right? Being able to build a ton. And so from day one, manufacturability was really, really important to us. And every time we do new iteration, it becomes more manufacturable, right? That's the goal. And we've done that really well. We can already build 8 a day of these, right? 2,000 plus a year. But the second part of that is, okay, now you've built a ton and given a customer a lot of hardware. Do they need, and this gets back to that force multiplication, do they need one person per vehicle to mission plan and operate these? If so, it's not a force multiplication, and that's not very efficient. So our goal is we build the software, we have patent pending swarming software that enables users to deploy tens, hundreds of vehicles, really, anywhere in the world. So you can mission plan from anywhere. I mean, with SATCOMs these days, right? Like that's kind of like step one of any autonomous vehicle. As long as you have a sat link, you can mission plan from anywhere and then autonomously deploy them, whether that's from USVs, aircraft, manned platforms, or just chalking one from your beach, your local beach, right? All of that's doable, where we try and stay as agnostic as possible to deployment. And you plan the mission, you send it, and then it's all on the vehicle, right? They're truly fully autonomous. So you can have additional user input if you want to. You can change some waypoints. You can send a new mission. You can have the vehicle come back to you and be like, hey, I detected this target. What do you want me to do now? Or you can just give the vehicle the autonomy to go and make those decisions itself.
And so the software, we'll pivot a little bit to the software side of the house. Well, actually, still on the hardware. So multiple modularity from the manufacturing side. just expand a little bit more on that, because I know that's a challenge, but if you can solve that problem, it seems, your ability to mass produce really changes the cost curve and your ability to deliver. How are you looking at that? And, are there any key, partners or ways you've been able to do this that makes it, that's really helping you out?
Yeah. So basically, with our patent pending modularity, we enable a large chunk of the vehicle to basically remain the same no matter the payload, right? So your propulsion is this. We can have a couple options, but in general, it's high speed or low speed. And that's another way we differentiate, right? We're the fastest AEV in the market.
How fast are you?
We go in excess of 30 knots.
How deep is that when you're cooking that fast?
Depth, yeah, you're definitely not on the surface, but you don't have to be too deep. You could be 2 meters. You could be a meter if you want to be, actually. You'll get a little bit of surface effect drag, but yeah. Yeah. So you have different powertrains, like I mentioned, but the core, basically you have two different powertrains. You have a core module that's always the same. And then you have your payload module, and that's where things are different, right? And we partner with some people on developing those payloads. But a lot of these payloads we won't manufacture. There'll be partners that manufacture them. There's a few in-house that we will manufacture at high volumes. But ultimately, we're creating, the truck or the iPhone, right? Where there's then this app store and a modular interface that other folks can integrate into. And that enables us to mass produce the vast majority of the vehicle, and then we can provide quite a few SKUs, right, where we support really high volume payloads, and then customers who want really custom payloads can develop those themselves because there's a modular standard interface.
How many do you see yourself? What's your target for production per month or year, however you're measuring that? Where are you now, and where do you want to go?
Yeah, so we are targeting 2,000 units a year in this facility. We could potentially go a bit above that. Currently, we're still in low rate initial production, though we just the other day built basically like 8 units almost in a day. So we're already at that ability to do that. So right now it's still, like sometimes we're building 5, sometimes we're building 10, 15 units a month. It just depends. But next year and the year after, we're targeting these much larger contracts where we produce hundreds of vehicles, right, per year, and then thousands pretty soon.
So cool. How about, so this technology or this capability requires a lot on the software. We've got swarming, the age of AI is here. How do you think of yourself kind of as an AI company? How are you integrating these rapidly changing technologies? And do you have any partners that are helping you through this? I know there was one big announcement, but I'll let you talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have a partnership with Palantir that's more on the manufacturing side right now. So they help us digitize our full manufacturing process. And that's another way in which we reach scale, and is super helpful because instead of, your notepad or your spreadsheets going through and trying to figure out what's going on, where are the hangups in our manufacturing process, where are the supply chain issues, we can identify those automatically by pulling all your data through Palantir. So that's been awesome. In terms of like AI on the vehicle themselves, so we've developed automatic target recognition in-house using sonar. We actually won a competition with the Naval Undersea Warfare Center Keyport on that front recently. And the vehicle itself autonomously makes decisions, right? It uses artificial intelligence to decide on an issue, right? For example, you have an obstacle. What do I do, right? So it detects an obstacle. What does it do? Does it go left, right, et cetera? So it can assess those decisions of like, okay, is there something on this other side or not? And what's the best way to approach this route? Over time, as technology advances, we built the vehicle on really like standardized architecture, right? That enables us to rapidly integrate new technology. So we're not trying to necessarily reinvent the wheel. While it is all our tech stack, it's done in the latest kind of generation of autonomous vehicle architecture, right? Which enables that to rapidly integrate this new technology and bolt on new AI packages, right? New versions of ATR, for example, new behaviors. We can rapidly integrate those.
That's so awesome. How has your experience been working with the government so far?
Yeah, honestly, so far it's been good. I think things have really changed. I mean, there's always some frustrations around the pace of movement, but I think things have very much changed for the better. There's a lot of very motivated program managers and operators who understand, truly understand the national security threats we face and want to find solutions and want to move fast. I think sometimes their hands are still tied, but that's really changing with these new executive orders, with things like the Forge Act and reconciliation. And I think over the next few months, we're going to see passing of a lot of laws that will enable them to be a lot more nimble. But yeah, I think there's a lot of great changes and progress that's been happening the last few years, things like DIU and SCO and others, that is really changing the conversation and enabling the adoption of technology much faster.
If you were to share any lessons learned, as you have a startup kind of in your space, how should they approach the partnerships within DoD or even with the primes? Because primes are obviously a big player in, defense technology.
Yeah, I think my advice is you have to find advisors or employees who really understand business development in the defense space. And the important thing to remember is it's still sales, right? It's still business development. If you're applying if you're just responding to solicitations, right, you're not going to be successful probably, right? You might win a few, but you're ultimately not going to build the kind of contract volume you want to build. And I think the thing to remember is if you're a venture-backed startup, you're probably a product company, right? You're not just trying to win sabers. You're not a saber mill. You're not just trying to do R&D. You're trying to build a product and sell it to the government. And in order to do that, you have to act as a sales organization. You have to get the support of the users and of the customer, the buyer. And those aren't the same thing in the US government, right? So I say there's 3 pillars to defense sales. You have to get the operator excited. So go do these operational events. Even if they cost you a lot of money and they don't pay you, go do some of them, particularly ones where you interact a lot with the operators, and get that feedback on your product, get them excited, make them advocates for your technology, right? And if you go there and you succeed, they'll advocate for it because they want that new technology. Once you have that advocacy, you can go and start building relationships with the program offices that are relevant to that technology and get them excited about and interested. And so that's the second pillar, right? Is that you need the program office supports, because they're the ones who will advocate for you and ultimately buy the vehicles and manage those vehicles for the operators. And the third pillar is, take the support of both of those to Congress and get, NDA language that helps facilitate the sale of your vehicles, get appropriations that helps you build relationships with key program offices and get you on contract vehicles. And then ultimately, if you want to get a program of record, you're going to need validated requirements from the operator side of the house. You're going to need to get on the POM, which the program offices can help with. And once they get that validated requirement, you're going to need to be on a congressional budget line, right? So you need all of those pillars to get to a big program. And, you need the right advice and the right people around you to help you understand that. And it's not going to happen just from responding to solicitations, and it's not going to happen if you just rely on someone from the government to shepherd you through all that. Those people change, right? Their jobs often change, and you have to often connect together a lot of different folks within the Navy and within a bunch of services to enable these programs to actually happen and help shape the direction of your technology's progress through the government.
Nelson, I guess this is like my 65th podcast with companies similar to yours. Mm-hmm. That was really good. I have not heard anyone put it like that, but there's a lot of these companies are just chasing zippers. They don't have that perspective. It'd be great if everyone understood. Hopefully from this, people can start understanding that. I mean, that is super powerful. Did you have any key partners that walked you through that? Was that, who really kind of gave you that model or figured this out with you that was able to, you can't just walk into Congress, it's tough to, like who did you have any key players that helped you through this or?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Decisive Point's been super helpful. My co-founder, Dan Hendricks, who comes from the defense BD world, has been super helpful on this front. And we have an amazing advisory board too. And on the acquisition side of the advisory board, we have Jim Smith, former acquisitions executive for SOCOM, right? So he managed the full $6 billion acquisitions budget for SOCOM. So he's been really helpful in helping us formulate our strategy. And then we have several admirals and generals on our advisory board too, some are more from the operator side, but also help formulate this strategy. And then we have some other investors that have also been helpful on this. But in general, like you learn through the fire hose, right? I think it's like as the founder, you have to take advice from a lot of different parties, and you'll get different advice and sometimes contradictory advice, and you have to figure out like, okay, what is actually the right path forward for my product and my company, right? Because you'll sometimes hear from investors, and you'll hear from even some of your customers or something. It's like, oh, this is the way things are done, or that has to be done, and you don't necessarily listen to that, right? Like I had one person tell me, oh, you can't hire a lobbyist until you have a contract, and another person tell me, oh, hire a lobbyist as soon as possible. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hire a lobbyist now, and it doesn't hurt, right? And that was the right advice, right? Because in our first year of lobbying, we won $1 million contract through congressional support. So yeah, that is always the challenge. You're going to get contrary advice, but you have to figure out what is your strategy and your approach. And my team solidified around this approach pretty quickly of like, hey, here's the three pillars of what that we need to do and need to achieve to make a large product sale to the U.S. government.
Yeah, no, that's super important. I like your approach, though. Oftentimes, you're in defense. You have dual use. Do you have a dual use? Have you looked at commercial at all? Or are you 100% DoD?
No, we definitely look a lot at commercial. We're pretty focused on DoD right now, but we have some commercial opportunities that we're working on. I think it's important. So this is that piece of advice you'll hear from investors. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, you've got to be dual use." Yeah. And I think that has become more nuanced over time. But there's a point where like, oh, we want some of your revenue to be commercial and some to be defense, maybe 50-50 or something like that. The reality is that for most companies, you only have so much engineering time and you have only so much sales bandwidth. And if you split that 50-50 between two different customers with two different needs, you might run into some issues, right? And be successful with neither. So you have to decide like, okay, let's focus down on a particular customer, a particular use case, and really spend 90% of our time there. That doesn't mean you can't pull other threads and still do things in commercial, but I think you're ultimately going to be better off when you have that sort of focus. So for some companies, you have to make a strategic decision of, does it make more sense for us to start out with a particular commercial customer or commercial market, or does it make more sense for us to start out with a defense or USG market? For us, we decided it made the most sense to focus on U.S. government. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And I think it ultimately depends on your product and what you're building. And then there's probably some rare products too, right? Where like you're selling, a better nail. You probably easily sell that to U.S. government or to commercial. So on the product engineering side, maybe not much changes, but you still do have like, okay, you're going to spend a lot of sales effort selling to U.S. government entities. Is that worth it right now? Or are you better off getting some big contract with a nail company on the commercial side, right? Like, so there's, you have to make those trade-offs. And I think the biggest thing is like, how much time do we have and where can we spend it? That being said, I think you should always pull threads, like spend 10% of your time pulling other threads, whether it's other parts of U.S. government, DoD, whether it's in foreign military sales or it's commercial sales, because these sales cycles are always long, and start pulling those threads early. Just pick your areas of focus too, though.
Yeah. So on the DoD side, you always hear about the valley of death. How do you get from this prototyping that you're in into full scale program of record that's enduring? How do you look at that, and where are you on that journey?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to look at it, right? One is that the US has done a great job of adding these organizations like DNU, SCO, AppFit, or whether they're organizations or programs that helps conquer this valley of death, right? They can provide transitional funding to a pretty significant degree, where you can still potentially make hundreds of millions of dollars in certain cases from these contracts. DIU in particular, SCO potentially. AppFit is capped at 50 million and for 1 year. But, in general, you can make potentially a lot of money for this transitional 1-2 years before you get to a program of record. And so I think those partners are a really key part of making that transition with funding. But you can also layer product, right? Like we have a product that just reached, TRL 8.9, this Skelmir S6.
Wow.
Now we've just launched our S12 product, right? Which is more in the TRL 5.6 range, right? So the Skelmir S6 is probably, in the valley of death, but the S12 is much earlier than that. And so we can continue getting funding on that. And so now the S6, though, there's plenty of opportunities we're working on right now to bridge that valley of death, DIU and things like that.
That's awesome. What has been your biggest technical or business challenge, to date, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our biggest technical challenge is definitely navigation. We recognized pretty early on that in our price point, there's not a good navigation solution, right? There's great navigation solutions on the high end. Companies like Exail and Sonardyne, they have great high-end navigation solutions, but they're expensive, right? So if you want to sell a vehicle for, less than $100,000, there's very few options. And those options out there don't work all that well. And so we started developing our own navigation system in-house that's adapted for our vehicle and our use case. And it means that we have a significant savings on our BOM, right? And we also have, we can control those algorithms and improve the performance and adapt it to our use case. So that is a very challenging process, though. It's not something that happens overnight, right? So we figured out stopgap measures to make a workable, tactically useful product while we continue to develop that in house. But the cool thing is now, how do we overcome it? You hire the right people and manage the project in the right way, right? Making sure that you're hitting milestones, setting clear milestones and achieving those. And now we're, in the process of transitioning our whole fleet to this navigation system in-house, which has huge benefits. So it's, been a somewhat long process in the grand history of a 2-year-old company. It's one that's been, massively worth it. And it just took, focus, hiring the right people and dedicated project management to do it.
That's great. That is obviously super challenging problem.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at autonomy in the next 5 to 10 years for like real deployments, in contested environments, where do you see that going? That technology case.
Great question. I think autonomy as it sits today is useful, right? It works. You can go out and autonomously run missions successfully across a wide variety of use cases and behaviors. What's slower to catch up is our policy around using autonomy in, say, weapons or things like that, or even certain potentially ISR use cases of like what will we allow vehicles to do, and what level of confidence do we need in their ability to do that or accomplish it successfully to take humans further and further out of the loop. And I think that is certainly an open question, and that's what we're going to see over the next decade or more. Our military and foreign militaries figure out and work through of like how much can we trust this? And we see it on the consumer, and the commercial side too, right? Where the process of getting to robo-taxis, right? How much can we trust this, and what do we trust them with? Waymo only goes up to on streets that go up to 30, 35 miles per hour, right? And certain cities that are known and learned. And I think on the defense side, you probably see that too. Like, okay, within a certain amount of time since last human contact, maybe the vehicle can act fully autonomously. But after a certain period, we need people in the loop. And I think it will depend on how we can better improve our understanding of how AI actually makes decisions and the certainty with which we think they'll make certain decisions. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there on that transparency. So yeah, time will tell. As we've seen in Ukraine, though, sometimes conflict has a habit of pushing you towards those decisions faster, right? And I think we're seeing higher levels of autonomy, and autonomy given AI getting more ability to make decisions than we currently give our systems. And I think in any kind of conflict in the future, we'll rapidly see that escalate because it's just what you have to do.
So what's next for Vatn, end of this year, early next? So like in the next calendar year, do you have any big launches, partnerships, or missions that you're super excited about?
Yeah, I mean, we've already announced 3 awesome things: our Palantir partnership, our new S12 product, and our new manufacturing facility. I think for the rest of the year, we'll see there's potentially a couple more partnerships we'll announce for new products, but probably save most of it for next year. The rest of 2025 for Vatn is really about growth, right? We're executing on our contracts. We're getting our vehicles into production, delivering to customers, and executing on what we set out to do and our mission and our plan. Like, we've been blessed that we've been able to remain really focused and get validation from customers on what we're doing. So we haven't had to pivot. And I think I see that focus maintaining, right? Like the recent reconciliation bill, for example, only validated kind of our market and what we're going after. And we just need to stay focused and continue executing.
Fantastic. Could go on. This has been fun. Obviously, as a customer, we have time to continue this conversation. But if folks want to follow what you guys are doing at Vatn, how best could they do that?
Yeah, follow us on LinkedIn. That's our most active social account. Yeah, Instagram, we post a little bit too. But on LinkedIn, we post a lot of fun videos, new product announcements, stuff like that. So yeah, follow us and stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, amazing. This has been fantastic. Learned a lot and look forward to doing this again when you get that program of record. So thanks a lot, Nelson.
I appreciate it.